All right, we are back. Thank you very much for staying with us, and we continue to focus on the upcoming budget speech by Finance Minister Tito Mboweni in Parliament on Wednesday and how it's going to impact the small and medium enterprises. According to the task group of the Policy Board for Financial Services and Regulation run by National Treasury, there's an estimated number of 1 to 3 million SMMEs in South Africa currently. And excluding survivalist and microbusinesses, this number tends to a range of 250,000 to 650,000 enterprises, which represents a 50% contribution to the GDP and even more to employment. But with a struggling economy, it may be difficult for SMMEs to thrive unless they get some assistance from government. Now, to help us understand what can we expect from the budget speech, we are joined by Karabo Mashugane, who is an SMME expert. Thank you very much for coming to our show.
Thanks for having me.
With so many enterprises, there has been concern on whether or not the establishment of the small business department is having an impact on them performing according to the way we expect them to contribute to GDP. Is that the case?
Yes, I think it is having an impact. It's not as large as obviously as we need. If we consider that small business development is an answer to, the joblessness in the country, the fact that we are slow in creating jobs says that we are not really having the impact that we should. But I think it's still a critical tool for intervention, and I think perhaps a couple of things. It cannot do its work in isolation. And for example, we keep talking about preferential procurement within government and 30% set aside and things. And I think that's where the Department of Small Business needs to come in, firstly, to monitor and engage with the various government entities to check whether these entities are actually giving those procurement opportunities to small businesses. But more than that, then to tailor the development support that they provide to assisting these small businesses, firstly with funding to be able to deliver on those contracts, and also with development support to be able to deliver a competent service. But also very importantly, if there's a delay in the payment from government, which is a recurring theme that we find, the small business development ministry is probably well placed to play that role in terms of either providing bridging finance or engaging with the departments and saying, look, what are you doing? Why aren't you paying these guys and helping?
But is it effective in terms of monitoring and evaluation? Because last year there was an announcement of 2.1 billion rand for these small businesses, and one would ask, in terms of what government may find out of that, SARS is saying something very different, rather Stats SA is saying something very different. 47% of these businesses fail, according to the liquidations report. So what does it say to you?
Well, you must consider, because of the high unemployment rate, people are starting businesses not because they see value that they can provide or they see a gap in the market, but a lot of times it's really just out of desperation and an effort to just put food on the table. And in cases like that, and especially where you have a lot of people that are sort of undereducated and without much work experience in terms of the service they're providing, then you can expect to have a high failure rate. And I think the problem is that even if you do provide funding, no matter how much funding you provide, funding is not going to answer the question if there's lack of competencies within the business to deliver the service, to manage the funding properly. And one of the key sort of impediments for SMEs is being able to attract the right skills to deliver on
yeah, but then if government is doing something and the private sector is also coming up with initiatives like the CEO fund that was established to help fund small businesses in the incubation sector, 1.4 billion rand that was announced. Here is the problem. Government comes with initiatives such as trying to boost township economies. But when you look at the communities, people are not working. They start businesses. Who is going to buy from them? And these businesses are suffering serious cash flow problems.
Yeah. Well, procurement is not a problem. I mean, in the economy, even private procurement accounts for, I think, about 60% or so there's procurement from households. So and even from black households, about R1 trillion a year. So the issue is not that there isn't a market out there, but the people that are buying, they're not choosing to go to the SMEs when they buy. They're choosing to rather go to established known brands, etc. And that's really at the heart of this of the issue there. Firstly, we've got to focus on developing competencies and competitiveness within the small businesses to be able to compete with larger brands. You know, a lot of the times, small business procurement and even development is looked at almost like a social investment sort of thing, where you're assisting businesses, giving them market opportunity as a favor, and not so much because they've got a compelling offering to provide. And I think the investment needs to focus on that, on identifying small business owners and people with potential that can provide a compelling value proposition and be able to compete if they are funded, if they are provided with the development support.
So what's your take on how the budget is going to impact survivalist and businesses that are operating from hand to mouth?
Well, small businesses have recently been hit hard. I think the VAT increase from the previous budget to 15%. Obviously, you know, is hindering them, but also you've had now the introduction of the minimum wage, and those are some of the issues that will probably impair on the ability for small businesses to operate and their profitability. So hopefully, I'm hoping maybe we'll see some relief in terms of there's a focus. The president announced in the State of the Nation address on simplifying the regulatory framework, and so hopefully, you know, we've got the small business tax scheme, for example. Hopefully that can be expanded in terms of the turnover threshold that it captures. And so I think I would like to see more of those things. I think funding is not an issue. There's so much funding that is out there between the DFIs, the Department of Small Business Development, and even corporate entities. I think the critical thing is...
But it's easy for you to say when we're sitting there, but the red tape is so frustrating.
It's you know, when you provide funding, we cannot fund irresponsibly. So we've got to satisfy ourselves that the entity you're funding will be able to pay back. And it's not just normally even just a question of will they be able to generate the revenue, but the individual you're funding, do they have the character where they you know, if they owe a person money, once they start having cash, do they prioritize paying debts or not? And so I think that for me is not where the problem is. The problem is on creating small businesses and capacitating them to be able to deal with the requirements of operating in a business. And so if we keep reducing the requirements, we've got to remember we are operating in a global environment, and so we've got to develop small businesses that not only compete and get given market opportunities locally, but they can compete with international competitors that are coming in.
Okay, I think there's so much to talk about. We will engage after listening to the speech tomorrow, and then which can take it further given the provisions that will be made.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're speaking to Karabo Mashugane, who is an SMME expert, telling us about what to expect from the budget speech tomorrow. Let's take a break. When we come back, the show continues.